Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're diving straight into the epic life of a man who quite literally bridged the gap between ancient wisdom and modern science. We're talking about a figure who stepped up at an absolutely crucial moment in history and, no joke, saved ancient Greek medicine and philosophy from being lost forever.
But every great story needs a little conflict to get things going, right? Well, picture this. His medical master once looked at him and said, "What have the people of Al-Hirah to do with medicine? Go and change money in the bazaar." Ouch! That is a devastating insult. It was hurled at a young, incredibly inquisitive student by Hunayn ibn Ishaq, the director of the Royal Hospital in Baghdad. The master was just super annoyed by the student's constant probing questions and actually kicked him out in tears. But here's the thing. That stinging rejection, it sparked one of the absolute greatest intellectual quests in human history.
That rejected student was Hunayn ibn Ishaq. He was born around 808 CE in Al-Hirah, an Iraqi city that was known way more for commerce and banking than for science. He was the son of a Nestorian Christian pharmacist, but as you'll see, Hunayn was definitely not destined for the bazaar. He grew up to become a legendary physician, a pioneering scientist, and the man the Arab world would eventually call the Sheikh of Translators.
Let's trace his incredible, almost cinematic rise. He goes from being a disgraced pharmacist's son all the way to the unparalleled intellectual titan of the 9th century Abbasid Caliphate. Look at how quickly he bounces back from his expulsion around 825 CE. Within just a few short years, he's appointed to the legendary House of Wisdom, and he eventually rises all the way to chief court physician. So, you're probably wondering, how exactly did he pull off this incredible turnaround?
Well, to understand that, let's move to part 1, the House of Wisdom and the Great Search. During the Abbasid Caliphate, Baghdad was this incredibly vibrant global hub. The caliphs, particularly Al-Mamun, were heavily sponsoring a massive movement to gather and translate all of the world's scientific knowledge. It was a true golden age of intellectual curiosity.
So, after getting expelled by his master for asking way too many questions, Hunayn didn't just go home and sulk. He vanished. He completely disappeared from Baghdad for over 2 years. He traveled to the lands of the Greeks, possibly spending some time down in Alexandria, and he had one singular, obsessive goal. He wanted to perfectly master the ancient Greek language so he could read those original medical texts entirely for himself.
But he didn't just stop at learning Greek. He went on a relentless hunt for actual manuscripts. We're talking about traveling across Mesopotamia, Syria, Palestine, Egypt, and deep into the Byzantine Empire, just to track down these rare, decaying texts. In his own autobiographical writings, he talks about searching absolutely everywhere for Galen's lost philosophical work, De Demonstratione. He eventually tracked down just a single, partial copy in Damascus. Honestly, he was kind of like an intellectual Indiana Jones, rescuing these foundational texts right from the brink of oblivion.
Which brings us to part 2, the translation revolution.
When Hunayn finally made his triumphant return to Baghdad, he brought an entirely new methodology to the capital. He was speaking flawless Greek, casually reciting Homer completely from memory. His former master was absolutely stunned by this, and they quickly reconciled. The caliph immediately recognized Hunayn's unparalleled talents and put him in charge of a massive state-sponsored translation pipeline. Now, how he changed the game is really fascinating. Before him, translators used this incredibly rigid word-for-word substitution method. They'd just swap a Greek word for an Arabic word, totally ignoring grammar. The result? Unintelligible nonsense that completely distorted scientific facts. Hunayn pioneered sense-for-sense synthesis. He'd read the entire Greek sentence, deeply grasp the underlying scientific meaning, and then seamlessly reconstruct that thought in elegant, natural Arabic or Syriac. It was a total game-changer. And he ran this whole operation like a highly structured modern academic department. He established a rigorously precise 4-step workflow. First, he'd collate multiple Greek manuscripts just to correct any scribal errors. Then, Hunayn himself typically translated the Greek into Syriac. Next, his brilliant son Ishaq, or his nephew Hubaysh, would translate that Syriac directly into Arabic. Finally, Hunayn would review the Arabic draft against the original Greek to guarantee absolute scientific precision. Working together, his team preserved massive volumes of work by Aristotle, Plato, and Hippocrates, and he personally translated 129 works of Galen.
But Hunayn was far more than just a translator, which leads us to part 3, pioneering ophthalmology.
You see, he was a brilliant, highly original medical pioneer in his own right, specifically when it came to eye care. His absolute masterpiece is the Book of the 10 Treatises of the Eye, which he compiled over 3 decades. This text is widely regarded as the earliest systematic textbook on ophthalmology in all of medical history. He wasn't just regurgitating Galen's old theories here. He added his own empirical observations from his real-world clinical practice. He detailed eye anatomy, categorized diseases like cataracts and trachoma, and laid out clear surgical interventions. He even positioned the crystalline lens right at the center of the eye, a concept that would completely dominate ophthalmic thought for centuries to come.
So the absolutely crucial point here is that Hunayn was quite literally giving the Arab world a brand new language for science. At the time, Arabic just lacked the necessary anatomical vocabulary to accurately describe the eye. So Hunayn brilliantly coined descriptive terms to fill those gaps. For example, he named the retina al-Shabakiyya because it visually resembles a net. The cornea became al-Qarniyya because it resembles a horn. And the uvea was named al-Inabiyya because it's dark like a grape. We actually still rely on the foundations of his medical terminology to this very day. His unmatched expertise eventually earned him the title of Chief Court Physician under Caliph al-Mutawakkil. But this immense power came with deadly peril. Let's look at Part 4, the Caliph's Poison Test.
The Abbasid court was an incredibly politically volatile place, and paranoia was running extremely high. The Caliph decided he needed to test Hunayn's loyalty, so he offered him a massive fortune to concoct a lethal poison to use against an enemy. Hunayn flatly refused. The disappointed Caliph threw Hunayn into prison for a grueling year, confiscating his property and his precious library. When he was finally brought back and actually threatened with execution if he didn't comply, Hunayn stated simply that his religion and his medical oath required him to help and not harm. And you know what? His ethical defiance actually won the Caliph's absolute trust, and he was fully reinstated.
Hunayn survived this intense trial, along with several other political plots by jealous rivals, and continued his vital work. It's time for Part 5, Bridge to the Renaissance. To truly understand Hunayn's legacy, we have to look at the absolutely staggering body of work he left behind, work that fundamentally shaped the trajectory of human history. Centuries after his death, Hunayn's Arabic translations and his original medical summaries made their way over to Europe. In Latin Christendom, he became known as Johannitius. His introductory text on Galen's medicine was translated into Latin as the Isagoga. This very work formed the nucleus of the Articella, which was the foundational medical curriculum used at the earliest European medical schools, in places like Salerno and Paris. By preserving these texts, Hunayn directly laid the groundwork for the European medical Renaissance.
So the next time you go to the eye doctor or dive into a classic philosophical text, remember Hunayn ibn Ishaq. Remember the young, rejected student who absolutely refused to give up. The brilliant outcast who mastered languages, hunted down decaying scrolls across empires, defied a caliph's direct order to poison someone, and essentially built the bridge between ancient wisdom and modern science. Thanks for joining me on this explainer. Keep asking those probing questions, and I'll see you next time.